Welcome back. It's been a minute. I've been MIA. Recently graduated USF, and I've just been stuck playing Alan Wake 2, Complete Psychological Warfare. I've been talking to some of my friends about it, and no one seems to know about Alan Wake. I played the first game, loved it, and this one just took it up another level. Really terrifying survival horror game. But aside from that, I've just been getting all my stuff together, such as my portfolio, my demo reels, my certifications done. I have a job interview next week for a marketing position, so fingers crossed that I actually get it. And yeah, just been kind of taking it all in 2023. Today, I'm refreshed, I'm all better now, and I decided to give it another go. But without further ado, let's kick it off with number 60. That is Children of the Corn. The film is set in farming town Ralston, Nebraska, following a cult-like group of murderous children killing the townsfolk and anyone who disobeys. A major point of interest is the town hall meeting, with the adults electing to have the government take over and receive a payoff, and that enrages the children. At the helm of it all, we have Eden, who's the new Isaac, who revolts and is being instructed by He Who Walks Behind the Rose. This movie is definitely a social commentary on environmentalism because of the bad crops, because of the fertilizers that are releasing all these toxins. For a film that is focused on the 1977 short by Stephen King, which has no ties to the 1984 first film, from what I gathered, because this is a reboot. While it does introduce some new ideas, and I can say it's its own standalone film, this being the 11th installment, it's just not a film that I particularly cared for as far as the performances, as far as the reveal, the CG of this monstrosity, which is really interesting, like looking back and reading articles about these online news sources of people giving praise to the little girl who plays Eden. And it's unfortunate because I don't have the same sentiment. I didn't really connect with either Eden or the protagonist of the movie being Bo. None of the people stood out to me, and then what's even more infuriating with this movie is how the townsfolk are so idiotic. I don't consider underrated or overrated, it's just, it exists. It's not one that I've ever really enjoyed, even though I will admit that the fourth one, when I was a little kid, I think that's the one with Naomi Watts, it did terrify me as a kid. Nothing of value has been added with this new installment, so for those reasons, you can let me know what you think about this film, but it's going to go in last place for me as the worst horror film of the year. A malevolent being known as the Jester terrorizes the inhabitants of a small town on Halloween night, including two estranged sisters who must come together to find a way to defeat the evil entity. A group of friends make their way to a secluded lodge for a weekend getaway, but their trip is interrupted by an ailment and entity forcing them to face their phobias. A film about a girl named Johnny nearing her 18th birthday, discovering what is harboring within her, a string of missing girls at a prep school, and her quest to uncover who is the perpetrator. So one thing that I will give this movie credit is that I found out the score is by Nick Zinner of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, so that was really cool. But what is Perpetrator about? Because this movie is kind of like a genre-bending sort of film. The way it is set up, I thought it was going to be a lot more dark and grim, and instead it's kind of supposed to be comical or campy, but it's just, I feel like it's another case of a movie with too many ideas, too many things going on at once. Maybe for some they'll really pique their interest, but for me, I think what I gathered from the movie, it's supposed to be a message about women's bodily autonomy, the implementation of the school's defense classes, the drills, and also the blood. Blood is a major point of this movie, whether it's nosebleeds or menstrual cycles or bleeding from the mouth, etc. And there are some other things with blood, but it just seems so random. Like the forevering, for example, that's a process that a girl goes through on their 18th birthday, I think via lineage, and they go through this shape-shifting transformation. I'm assuming that's what it is. Because I saw a lot of people say that it's a vampire movie, but definitely not a vampire movie. I feel like a lot of things aren't really explained, and it doesn't need to be overly explained. You don't have to spoon feed me, but it's just, I just found it kind of a mess, if I'm being honest. A family makes a deal with the demon possessing their daughter in exchange for another human host. The hapless new tenant enters the property not knowing what awaits him. After Christopher Robin abandons his woodland-dwelling friends in the 100-acre woods to attend college, they are forced to fend for themselves, endure harsh weather and starvation, returning to their primal instincts. Now, okay, how do I say this? There are those type of movies that are so bad they're good. For example, Llamageddon. I love that movie. I would rewatch that movie. This, unfortunately, is not that type of situation. From the CG, abysmal, to the bad acting, to the anthropomorphic creatures, which literally is just like a dude wearing a pig mask or a bear mask. I wasn't a fan of. Like, I just don't understand the idea of taking something in because it's public domain and going with something that's not even run-of-the-mill, that's just so bare and lifeless. Oh, bare, haha, get it? No pun intended. But it's just literally adds to nothing. That's my biggest problem with this movie is as much as I do like slashers, this movie makes no attempts to make a childhood character into an actual living nightmare, which I think they could have. Instead of spending time with the CG, and they could have allocated their budget in a different way and made it more of a interesting and frightful movie. But I don't really know what the goal was, just to make some schlocky slasher film. But ultimately we got this movie, which between the setup and just the build-up of what's happening, for example, in the beginning with Christopher Robin and his fiance, not intriguing. And then when we're introduced to these group of girls that are vacationing at this Airbnb or vacation spot, it's just, I could not distinguish any of the girls, except for maybe one. I think it was the blonde who was super vapid and into herself, taking selfies and in the jacuzzi, doing her own thing. Cool, whatever. But for the most part, I could not distinguish all the girls because they were just so, they all merged together. There's like nothing that really stood out about them. Winnie and Piglet, they do have some like interesting kills, if I want to say that. Very methodical, which is kind of weird because I'm like, who is investing this much time into torturing someone this way? It makes you think that they're supposed to be more intelligent than they are, or led to believe. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about this movie other than I did not like it. A woman travels to a seaside Scottish convent after the death of her priest brother causes her to investigate the validity of the church's accounts and discovers a disturbing truth. In 1969, Ludlow, Maine, Judd Crandall and his girlfriend Norma are ready to join the Peace Corps, but their plans are interrupted by a ravenous dog, the peculiar folk in town, and Ludlow's dark history as it all comes to a clash. Reducing it down to one word, it's really flavorless. And it adds no value. As a prequel, that's what is most infuriating about it, is that I love the original Pet Sematary. And this one is supposed to be a prequel to the 2019, which already I did not like that movie. But yeah, this one didn't really add anything. Like, even the climax of this movie, I thought it would be really interesting, or it would be a turning point where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna change my mind. There's gonna be a moment where something inciting happens. And instead it was very anticlimactic. Being that it's taking place in 1969 and then we have like flashbacks, Native American lore, nothing. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but I feel like it didn't add any value whatsoever. The CG in the movie, oh man, there's like a scene in the hospital that just, it killed it for me. A lot of these movies that seem to rely heavily on like the CG, and it just looks really bad. There's a big surprise with having David Duchovny in it and Pam Grier and a few other actors that I'm familiar with, but none of them really fulfill their role. I mean, they're doing what they can, you know, with the script that they're given. I feel like this is the literal definition of a cash grab. A Christmas celebration becomes grim for the residents of Angel Falls as a masked cloak killer dubbed the Angel goes on a murder spree. Our main protagonist, Winnie, is able to foil the murderer's plans, but a year later, when the town has forgotten the events, Winnie can't move forward. One night she makes a wish, seeing an aurora borealis, a rare sighting in the town, and is transported to a parallel universe where the killer is still slicing up havoc. Police raid a house in El Paso, Texas, and find one lone survivor of a brutal massacre. Taken into custody for questioning, the mysterious man starts telling them strange tales of other worlds, mythical creatures, demons, and the undead. A weekend camping trip among friends, Ben, Ellie, Margaret, and Thomas, and their kids, takes a different turn after hiking through a wooded area. The group enters an abandoned fort and discover a hole that attracts the children and causes them to act strangely. I think on paper this film had potential, but the entire duration of the film, the way I would describe it from my personal viewing experience, is sheer boredom. That's what I would chalk it up to. Though there is like a point that I wanted to make that is of interest, such as like when Ben realizes that the children are behaving in a peculiar manner and they're just playing these psychological games with him, making him question reality of what really happened. Even the reveal of what happened to the children is, like I said, this movie had a lot of potential. Unfortunately, I was just not a fan of it. I was not even a fan of the children. Similar to like Children of the Corn with Eden. I saw articles where people were saying the performances of the kids were great, and I'm like, where? You know, and that's not me trying to be shady or come at kids. I'm just gonna be honest, like none of the performances were standouts to me. So fortunately, not a movie that I care to rewatch, not a movie that is going to be memorable to me, just aside from like putting it on this list. Quick check off, like I watched it, but yeah. Sam, a gas station clerk, receives a random call from Emily, a nearly blind woman who's running from her murderous ex in the woods. Using a phone, Sam becomes Emily's only chance for survival as she guides the terrified woman through a video call. A troubled security guard begins working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. While spending his first night on the job, he realizes the late night shift at Freddy's won't be so easy to make it through. I've come to the conclusion that I am just not the target audience when it comes to killer animatronics in horror movies. Another similar case is Willy's Wonderland. I was not a fan of that movie. And also, this movie is fan service. So I am not really a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's. And so, like, I'm not invested in the lore. I mean, I will give it some credit that there is practical effects involved and puppetry with the creation of the mascots, the animatronics featured in the film. I think it doesn't help already that video games turned to film adaptations tend to not succeed. For me, if I'm being honest, I think the one that I would really highly praise that gets it, like, it's a near perfect, is 2006's Silent Hill, which we're going to see a return to Silent Hill hopefully next year. I think it would be fine for like as an entry-level horror movie, Five Nights at Freddy's. But I guess for me personally, as someone who watches so much horror, I think this is PG-13. But yeah, the cutscenes before it's gonna get into like some brutal moment or the animatronics are going to massacre XYZ people. I was hoping for a little bit more gore. Unfortunately, you know, it is what it is, and I think they're going to make a sequel. Just not my cup of tea. Childhood friends Ben and Dom enjoy their night out dancing in a club, celebrating Ben's last night before moving to LA to be an adult film star. However, their night is derailed when they are coerced to go on a drug run. Set in December 1945, a group of military veterans reunite at their friend's memorabilia-filled brownstone. With a seance in mind, the group cautiously acquiesce to the demands of their host, inviting ghosts and unveiling dark truths. A disturbed babysitter experiences a sexual awakening while using LSD to treat a seemingly sick child from a family with dark secrets. Josh Lambert heads east to drop his son Dalton off at school. However, Dalton's college dream soon becomes a living nightmare when the repressed demons of his past suddenly return to haunt them both. So I was actually highly anticipating to watch this movie because I am a fan of the Insidious films. I actually found it really creepy, the first one, when I initially watched it back in high school, I think. With this one, even though it does involve family ties and family relationships that are severed with Renee, the mother, and the father and son dynamic just being diminished because of repressed memories from the events of those two films. Like in this one, I feel like it's really stifled, if I'm being honest. Like there are points with this movie that are great as far as like the visuals, because this is Patrick Wilson's directorial debut, which mind you, the screenplay is by Leigh Whannell and Scott Teems. And with this fifth installment, I feel like it's very cookie cutter. They play it extremely safe with this one. So that's the thing that I wish this new entry would have done, is just be more bold and just take more risk. Other characters, like I said, that just like the way it ends to kind of like put it in a pretty little bow and have Lin Shaye at the end, it's just really kind of threw me off. Yeah, so also the red-faced lipstick demon, which I do like in the first movie, but in this one, he looks really questionable. Did anybody notice that? Does he look kind of strange in this new movie? And just the utilization of that demon and, yeah, going through the red door, it just actually pushed me further away from the further. Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet is a 250-year-old vampire. Now tired of his life, he wants to die at last after the disgrace he has caused. It's political, it's satirical, it's a vampiric reimagining or alternate story of a real-life public figure. With this film, I think the thing that I took away from it, at least in the figurative sense, is that vampires, being immortal, similar to political leaders who rise to power, receive notoriety because of their contributions, illegal activities, mass destruction, all of the above or more. I think that's the general gist, or what I gathered, was that they are immortalized. The fictional portrayal of Pinochet, I think it's supposed to mirror his real life and longevity in power of 15 plus years, or near 15 years. I'm not going to go through like his entire reign from the early 1970s through 1990. But as far as the merits of the film, the comparisons with like this vampire and feeding on the civilians of Santiago and being part of the French Revolution and the need for blood and sustenance, I think there are some really well-crafted moments, bloody moments in this movie. For example, a woman who is bludgeoned in the face and it's just caving in. That was a pretty interesting shot. But as far as like story, it's not really intriguing enough. It's not funny or witty enough for me personally. Because of the stylization of it, because it's supposed to have like this gothic sort of feel to it, it reminds me of What We Do in the Shadows, except that show is actually funny. Everybody in this movie is corruptible. That's the message that I'm getting from like the nun who's brought in to investigate like all these bank accounts and funds and get everything together for the family who's money hungry. Like everybody in this movie has an agenda, and that's what it comes down to. All right, and to conclude this list of the worst of 2023, we have Skinamarink at number 42. Kevin and Kaylee wake up one night to discover their parents have mysteriously vanished. Their home becomes a nightmarish prison with nowhere to escape and no one able to help until a sinister voice beckons for them. It just moves like molasses. And while it is horrific in the sense that it's focusing or fixating on these children who are affected, who by all accounts are being preyed upon by something in the figurative sense or literal sense, yes, conceptually, that's horrifying. And looking at it from the lens or the perspective of something that's universal or the collective unconscious mind, things that children conjure up, yes, it makes for a terrifying concept. Unfortunately, like I said, this movie moves like molasses. The duration is just way too long, and I think it would have just benefited from just remaining as a short film. And while there are really cool like framing techniques, and it really does play with your psychological senses as far as like trying to unveil what's hidden in the shadows, what's in the dark. I do like the aspect of trying to decipher what really happened to these kids. And I went down a whole rabbit hole. So if you want to watch my review, I talk about it, but yeah, I'll link it somewhere up here. But unfortunately, this movie just lands in my worst because I don't think I could put myself through this experience again. I was going to rewatch it in preparation for this video, but I just didn't want to put myself through that drudgery. I know this is a very divisive film. Some people really found this terrifying when it got leaked. Others, like myself, I feel like I have FOMO because maybe I just don't get it. I don't know. Either way, like I'm not here to gatekeep or tell anyone what to like or what not to like. It's just cinema at the end of the day. So I'm not taking it too seriously. But yeah, these were the movies that I found the worst for 2023. I know that I missed out on quite a few movies. So Snowfalls was one of them where I didn't get to that film. There's another one, Dear David. There's quite a few. There's a lot of movies that came out this year. So I just cannot get to every single one, but I tried my best. Again, let me know what you guys think. I'll be back soon. Have a great night, guys.